G'day! You know, like me, you probably reckon Australia's the best place on earth, and certainly it's one of the few places where you can do something like this. Go four-wheel driving up a beach and do a spot of fishing. Absolutely glorious. Now this show is all about showing people who don't get to do a lot of this stuff a few of the basics about driving on sand and beaches and all the rest of it. Yes, I know what you're thinking. It's just an excuse for me and the crew to spend a week on North Stradbroke Island having a good time. You might be right. Enjoy the show, eh? There's plenty to know. Now before you hit the beach, you've got to make sure your truck's beach ready, okay? Milo's done heaps of beach work over the years and really it hasn't done that much damage. I mean, she's been buried in quicksand and all sorts of stuff. And I think the reason that she survived so well is because of a little bit of preparation before and after. It only takes a couple of hours. I always give it a really good wash, and then when it's dry, I'll hop underneath with just something like this, you know, a litre bottle of lanolin. In fact, it takes about a litre to do the whole job. Just with a hand spray, you know, it's nothing high tech here. What is high tech, I guess, is that I spend enough time underneath the truck to make sure that I've got it in all the little sills and crevices, all around the springs. It makes everything a little bit sticky, so it picks up a little bit of sand, but you can wash that off when you're finished. It doesn't really matter. The proof of the pudding is no rust. You can't beat that. Next thing to do is make sure the engine is spot on. In my case, that means I always do an oil change, and you never do an oil change without changing your filters. Remember to check your fuel filter too. You know, if it hasn't been changed for a while, it's a good idea to do it. Why is that so critical when you're only just hopping on the ferry and, you know, in our case, like the beach is only an hour away? Why is it so critical? We're not talking about Simpson Desert distances here, are we? But we are talking about a place where if you get stuck because of some little issue to do with reliability, you're likely to lose your truck. When the tide's coming in, you know, it's not going to wait for you to wait for the breakdown truck to get there, is it? It's just not going to. You do not want to break down, and your engine is working that much harder driving on sand. It's not funny. The other thing to do, if you've got grease nipples, if you're one of those lucky people who owns a truck old enough to have a few grease nipples, make sure they're chocker with grease. You and your components will survive the trip if you fill it with grease before you go, and then you give it another squirt when you get back. That way there's no room for sand and salt water and stuff like that to get in, especially in the uni joints, you know? I mean, there they are spinning away just above the beach with all that salt water and sand flying around. The wonder is they don't chew out in about 10 minutes flat. This is what you can do to help prevent that. Grease them up. If you've got sealed bearings, oh, well, bad luck. I'd keep an eye on them if you're going to do a lot of beach driving. They will last several trips as long as you do your preparation when you get home too. And what does that mean? That just means getting it up in the air or something, giving it a good old hose underneath, giving it a really good wash. Maybe another lanolin or something like that. There's lots of different products, you know, that are advertised for use on beaches. Some of them are good, some of them aren't. At the end of the day, in my experience anyway, a fair bit of hands-on and something like lanolin seems to be about the only thing that really works. I can just about smell the sea from here. I'm going to have to get this wrapped up in a hurry and get over to the beach. But not before I go shopping. I'm always giving the handbrake a hard time about her shopping trips, but by crikey, I just love going into four-wheel drive accessory shops, especially this one at Opposite Lock, because I needed to pick up a few things anyway. I mean, I've just about worn out my snatch strap. They do go off over time. My Storms, they've been rattling around in the glove box for ages. They're full of sand and they're breeding all sorts of different pressures now because I've been mucking around with them. And I wanted one of these new Opposite Lock compressors. By crikey. They pump things up faster than Fat Kevy on a bar stool, I'm telling you. They're awesome. Pretty soon we were out on Stradbroke and looking for an access to the beach. Now there's plenty of them around. This is the one up at Point Lookout. And on Stradbroke, because there is one sealed road that runs sort of around the top half of the island, they're all signposted too. Once you get onto that main beach though, it's four-wheel drive only territory. Milo Beach. Before we go on the beach, we've got to let the tyres down. You know that, we've done it a million times. But just to summarise what we've learned over the years, and what we've learned from Terry too, I mean, it's an ever-changing subject. Don't muck around. Drop your tyres down to about 16 psi, which is what these new Storms are set at, or the equivalent in terms of footprint. In other words, if you've got a huge load, have a look at it. You might be at 18 or 20 to get that same long footprint. Have a look at your trailer. If you're towing a trailer, let it down, once again the same, you know. You can't really overdo it on the deflation, so to speak. I mean, you can get down to 6 or 8 pounds without a problem. You might start to lose the tyres then, but 16 psi, beautiful. And do it before you even get on the beach, okay? Because the worst little bit is always this bit at the end of the track as it goes onto the beach. At the same time, don't forget to lock the hubs. Righto, let's go, eh? It's amazing the difference 2 or even 4 pounds makes when it comes to letting your tyres down. So many times I've seen guys in newer trucks, inexperienced blokes, you know, they hit the beach and the truck is working so hard to get through the soft sand. If they just be brave enough to take those tyre pressures from 28 to 16, they bowl right through this stuff. Washouts can be a real wipeout, they really can, because it's always changing, the sand's crumbling away. The correct way to deal with a washout is to make sure you hit it spot on 90 degrees. Don't go at it on an angle, or you'll be just like Chuka when he turned his Patrol on its side, or me mate Kev, he rolled a Land Rover on one of these things. Just from hitting it on a bit of an angle, the sand gave way in one place, didn't give way on the other, and bingo, it fell over. I mean, all you need to do, that's a bit of weight on the roof rack, and in Kevy's case, a bit of weight on the driver's seat. Bingo, you've fallen on your backside. Here we are cruising down Main Beach, and you wouldn't believe it, I was actually out looking for someone who might be in trouble, and I found someone. Unfortunately, Paul was in real trouble because he'd gone to turn off the beach. He had his tyres let down, he'd done everything properly, and one of his CVs let go. That's how hard that little stretch is between the sandhills and the beach. That's where the problems occur. Especially here because no one's been up this track for a while. The correct way to use a snatch strap is with a whole lot of common sense. Take your time, make sure the hitch points are the right ones. You don't want to muck around. And the other thing people don't realise too is snatch straps go off with time, they really do. You might only use them half a dozen times, but if you've kept them 2, 3, 4 years and they've hung around in the sand, the sun, whatever, they can really lose an awful lot of, I don't know what it is, plastic stuff? Whatever it is inside the strap anyway, they'll go off and they'll break. You do not want them to break. So you find the right hitch point. In this case we're using the tow bar on Paul's truck because it spreads it over the chassis. I've got my rated shackles on Milo, and that's spread over the chassis. Probably because you're stuck anyway, you could slip it into reverse and sort of start driving as soon as I start moving, I reckon. Get the driver to get a little bit of motion up themselves. Now see how I've got that strap Z'd? All you regulars know about that, but that's what makes all the difference because you're not actually towing them out, you're springing them out with a bit of a bounce. There we go, Paul's back on track. His handbrake's happy, the kids are in the back, all's good. But because he's got a busted CV, I'm going to follow him up the beach to the other turn-off, just to make sure he can get off, because that is that tough little bit. Beach driving's all about understanding the tides. Once you've let your tyres down, the next thing you need to do is to understand the tides. In fact, you probably need to have a look at a tide book before you even get there. You can find tides on your computer. Just Google tide heights or something like that, tide times. Just make sure it's for the area that you're going to, and there they are. In this case, We've got a nice, what we call a long beach, which means the sea's right out, and that gives us heaps of room to move. The sand's nice and tight. You can cruise up here in two-wheel drive in second or third gear, no problems at all. In fact, you could do it in fourth, but why would you? You're here to enjoy yourself after all. I reckon beach camping's one of the best things on earth, and I tell you what, even my handbrake likes it too. The kids absolutely love it, so, you know, you can bet we spend, an awful lot of time camping, which is funny. I do it for a living, still enjoy it, absolutely love it. The whole trick to beach camping is to pick a good site. If there's a lot of wind, you want to find somewhere in between the trees and down low. You've got to remember when you drive onto barges that a lot of the time you're going to be driving straight off onto the beach. This is the Kooringal Trader. It's run by one of my mates, and it's only a 4-vehicle ferry. Well, he can get 5 or 6 on there, and it takes that short little trip from Amity Point over to Kooringal, which is the southernmost point of Moreton Island. It's not a very long trip, but there's no way you can drive it, even though in places it's only sort of a foot deep. There's a sandbar runs all the way along here, and like all sand islands, it's constantly changing. I don't think I've ever been on the barge where the put-off point's been the same more than a few weeks apart, because the islands are always changing. We call it tail wag. You can see here the bar has shifted probably about 100 metres from where it was 2 months ago, last time I came over here. We call it tail wag because all the islands along Queensland's coast, being sand islands, are moving constantly. They sort of wag their tails. They've always got a thin bottom end, southern end, and it moves as the sand comes and goes. And that's not the only thing that moves. Big trees at the moment too, all over the place. Al was telling me that he had to stick a buoy on this one because it's been shifting about 10 metres a day, depending on which way the tide's going, the wind and all the rest. And if he catches a propeller on that, or someone in a boat just runs straight into it, they're going to be in all sorts of grief. We're waiting for Karen to tell us when to go and where to go. That's because you can only have one boss on loading and unloading on a barge. Watch to see who it is, in this case it's our deckhand, and make sure you follow their instructions. Otherwise you wind up with a massive big tangle up as everyone hits the soft sand, and that yo-yo in the middle who forgot to let his tyres down, he winds up stuck, and bingo, all of a sudden you've got all sorts of problems. And don't forget as you drive off that the barge might be moving around. It's going to feel a little bit awkward. The whole trick is to keep on going. Don't stop. Don't think, oh dear, it's shifting. Keep going. Driving on soft sand's a little bit different to driving on almost anything except ice. I guess what you have to think about is that your tyres are down already and the sand's squirming around. So it's going to feel a little bit weird and things are going to happen a little bit later than they should. Now that's quite normal. The whole trick is not to worry about it, just to keep on going, keep up lots of momentum. And you know, if you're going left and the truck isn't, well just hang in there, it will. Sometimes a little bit of throttle helps no end, especially in a four-wheel drive of course, because it pulls everything back into gear. I tend to find that if I'm going the wrong way, a little bit of throttle and a whole lot of steering wheel is just enough to pull you out. Get a bit of practice before you get into the trees. We had about 3 weeks of rain just before we got out to Stratty, and that meant there were natural springs all over the place. This is the track through the back of keyholes, and look at it, it was water nearly all the way, and erosion too. And until we came through here, no one had actually been up that bit of the track. I liked that, bit of adventure, it was great. Back on the main road down to Keyholes. Oh dear. What have you done?
Around the chimney, mate. Any chance of a help?
Oh, gee, yeah, I guess so. No worries, mate. That'll be fine. We'll just winch it out, eh?
Yeah.
Poor old Jimmy. I was sitting there looking at it, thinking, no snorkel, that water's up pretty high. Could be a drama here. Apart from the fact that the wallet and the iPod and everything else were in a bag in the back, and they were well and truly sodden. But anyway, first step to do is get it out of the water, isn't it? Get some of the water out of it. See the new nylon runners? You need those if you're running a rope. I wish someone had told me that before. I've been cleaning my corrugated rollers every trip I've been on lately. Now I've got nylon rollers, I don't have anything to worry about. Thanks, Mike. That was Mike from Pit Stop put me onto those. Winches are great. It's not often you get to use them on the sand though, unless you're prepared to bury a tyre or winch off something really solid. Much more useful than axe tracks. I'll tell you what, the old Warren didn't even notice the Jimny. They don't weigh a lot even when they're full of water. The driver's actually quite an experienced four-wheel driver, and he's just sold a 40 series that was kitted up to the max. He'd only had the Jimny a couple of weeks and planned on doing all sorts of things to it, including fitting a snorkel, which really would have helped here. He's just out on a bit of a joyride. This puddle should have only been 6 inches deep. You never ever try and start a motor if the air filter is sodden. That's one of the golden rules, because if you do, the thing will try and hydraulic, which means the pistons are pushing water instead of air, and that's it. You're in trouble. You'll bend rods, could even break bearings, all sorts of stuff. In this case, we couldn't even get the plugs out because the little Jimny's got plugs that are buried somewhere right down near the sump, and I didn't have a tube spanner or an extension that'd get in there. So we wound up towing him where he could get to a garage and get a few tools and have a bit of a look at it. Try and get the water out of it before anything bends. That's the whole trick to submerging an engine. If it stops, leave it stopped until you've sorted it out. Drain the water out of it. If you find that the motor is absolutely chocker with water, it's well worthwhile pulling the plugs, draining the oil, getting everything out of it, and then getting one of your mates to tow you around the block a few times in gear. Little bit of WD-40 down the plug holes, put it all back together, put some fresh oil in, you might have a chance of it starting. There's such a thing as beach driving etiquette. You wouldn't believe it, would you? But there is. It starts with a couple of really simple things. When you're driving down the beach, you are still legally on a road. So you don't drink, you don't hoon, you don't carry on like a yobbo. We don't need any of that. I mean, you know, that's what we do after hours, isn't it? Whenever you see someone on the beach, steer well clear of them. Now, the normal thing, because parking on a beach is usually involves parking up near the dunes, is that they'll have their truck up on the dunes and they'll be down there in the water. Now, that means there's a big chance of kids, the wife, anyone running up and down the beach, and they can't hear you. Even in a loud truck, they won't hear you because of the noise of the surf. So you need to slow right down whenever there's anyone around, especially kids. Take it nice and easy and give them a whole lot of clearance. You keep doing that, we'll have no accidents. We'll all be driving on beaches for the rest of our lives. When you go to park on a beach, reverse up as far as you can into the soft sand. By doing that, you'll have flattened out the sand track, and even if the tide comes right in or anything else goes wrong, you're on the safest part of the beach and you've got a good chance of getting a good old roll and getting back onto the beach. Off you go. Plus, of course, you've left your truck out of the way. There's nothing more annoying than people who just stop right in the middle of the beach. You're seeing the world's worst fisherman here. Oh boy. You can't drive around the headland at Point Lookout anymore. Actually, you haven't been able to for about 40 years, to be honest. But there is a butte walkway that takes you right around the tip, and that's where you can see the whales at the right time of year. Sort of late August they start coming in, and you can do a bit of fishing off the rocks. I don't think I've ever been there without seeing turtles or dolphins or something out there in the water. Absolutely awesome place, it really is. There's so much life off these rocks, it's not funny. You don't mind dipping through a bit of fresh water after all that sand driving, eh? The mud doesn't matter, it gets the sand off. This is what they call the tripod track, which runs from over on the west side of Stratty, and you can run straight over the top of the island and pop out near the Amity Road turnoff. You can also come down the beach on the eastern side of the island, as we did the first time we took it, and cut in through the back at the other beach access about halfway down Main Beach. Either way, you might have a bit of trouble finding that take-off point down near Brown Lake, but you'll have no problems at all finding the little drive-off behind the Amity turnoff. And once back on the TYRE, it's time to pump the tyres up, and I'll tell you what, this opposite lock pump just did it so quick it wasn't funny. It hasn't got a built-in gauge and it hasn't got any pressure relief, so you want to keep a bit of an eye on it because crikey, it blows it up fast. Well, I hope you enjoyed the show as much as we enjoyed making it, and I hope it inspired you to get out on a beach too. Okay, well I'd better go. I guess I've still got a fair bit of work to get through here. I'll catch you later. Whoa, I'll catch you later. Hey! Australia really is the greatest place on earth. And I reckon the Outback is the heart and soul of our country. There's nothing I love better than getting in Milo and driving off into the vast peace and quiet that you only get when you're right out in the bush. And the best thing is, it's just down the end of your street too. So come on, this is where you'll feel the true heartbeat of Australia. Come out here and have a look.